this is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed human.
This is Red Pilled America.
Before we start the show, just a reminder to share, like, and subscribe to this podcast wherever you're listening to it. And please, give us a 5-star rating. Help us save America, one story at a time.
Bitcoins is a remarkable cryptographic achievement.
Previously on Red Pilled America.
Do you think this is a currency that's really going to work eventually?
Well, I think it is working.
I look for colleagues to join with me in introducing a bill to outlaw cryptocurrency.
Is Bitcoin dangerous to America?
Throughout history, people have used all kinds of physical currency.
The one thing that's missing, but that will soon be developed, is a reliable e-cash.
Satoshi Nakamoto wrote a white paper entitled Bitcoin, a peer-to-peer electronic cash system.
Because of the 2008 financial crisis in which Bitcoin was created and can be seen as a catalyst for interest in Bitcoin, people have decided that perhaps this monetary system is not the best one.
I was looking for more places to talk about Bitcoin. Well, the Silk Road site came up.
The product that would eventually make Silk Road a national headline were the drugs. Many believe Bitcoin is dangerous because it lets criminals get away with dirty deeds anonymously. President Trump is one of those people.
Crypto assets can facilitate unlawful behavior, including drug trade and other illegal activity, writes the president.
But the president is getting some bad advice on this topic. And we know this because it was Bitcoin's lack of complete anonymity that saved Curtis Green from spending perhaps the rest of his life behind bars. I'm Patrick Corelchi, and this is Red Pilled America. It's our second episode looking into the cryptocurrency Bitcoin. In part 1, we explained how we've been hearing a lot of concern about the new internet cash called Bitcoin, so we wanted to find out if it was really dangerous to America. To do this, we first needed to understand what money actually is, so we started by delving into the origin of cash. Throughout history, people used all kinds of things as currency. Indians used shell wampum, Ethiopians used rock salt, Malaysians even used crocodile figurines, and practically everyone used gold and silver. Each of these currencies had value because the people agreed they had value. Eventually, gold and silver became one of the most universal forms of currency, but over time, even these precious metals became difficult to handle. The Federal Reserve began circulating money, with each bill representing a portion of gold held in our U.S. Treasury. This gold-backed currency system was the norm for many years, until President Nixon dropped this so-called gold standard in 1971, and from then on, our paper money was backed by a promise from the U.S. government. By the early 80s, a small group of privacy enthusiasts began to form. They were concerned about how the government could easily track every financial transaction, so they began developing this concept of an anonymous digital cash outside of Big Brother's watchful eye. They called themselves cypherpunks, and by the late 90s, a few of them actually tried to market their digital cash idea. But the demand for an internet currency wouldn't arise until the 2008 financial crisis. That's when a mysterious figure named Satoshi Nakamoto developed the idea for Bitcoin, an internet cash that could bypass the Federal Reserve. Satoshi's technology removed the need for banks by using a network of computers to automate the banking system's accounting function. But Bitcoin needed a large-scale test case to prove its utility. That would come with the launch of Silk Road, an anonymous marketplace on the dark web, a portion of the internet that is invisible to regular internet browsers and where anonymity is sacrosanct. Curtis Green, an early Bitcoin enthusiast, was drawn to Silk Road's message boards because it was a hotspot for people interested in cryptocurrency. But Silk Road quickly became the eBay for selling illegal drugs, with Bitcoin as the currency. The administrator of the site eventually made Curtis a moderator of a new community message board that helped people on the site that were showing signs of self-harm. But Curtis would soon find out that by participating in Silk Road, he put his life in jeopardy. In early 2011, at about the time that Curtis Green became the moderator of Silk Road's harm reduction forum, news of the site's existence hit the media.
There really is something exciting about buying stuff online. You pull the trigger, click the purchase confirmed button, then comes that unbearable 3 to 7 day wait. And finally, the package arrives. Your new shoes from Zappos, those books you ordered from Amazon, and then there's your LSD. You heard right. Pot, acid, cocaine, delivered right to the front door in a small, inconspicuous envelope from Silk Road. The transactions are anonymous, and the website's owner claims untraceable. That is, if you can figure out how to get to the website. Adrian Chen wrote a piece about Silk Road for Gawker.com. Adrian Chen is in our New York bureau. Adrian, welcome.
Thank you.
So tell us more about this website, Silk Road. How is it even possible that this site exists? I mean, this is all totally illegal, right?
It is illegal, and the only way that it possibly exists is the fact that the people on it think that they are completely anonymous. They are using technologies like Tor and only exchanging in the untraceable digital currency Bitcoin.
Okay. The shocker here was not that you could acquire illegal drugs online. People had been doing that on places like Craigslist for years. No, the real story here was that illegal drugs could be purchased online using Bitcoin. And many believe that this new internet cash was entirely untraceable.
And explain to us what a Bitcoin is.
A Bitcoin is a virtual currency that is basically the digital equivalent of cash. It's completely peer-to-peer. There are no banks acting as middlemen. A transaction goes right from buyer to seller, just like a cash transaction in the real world.
So how do you even buy a Bitcoin?
Bitcoins are for sale on all sorts of exchanges. You can use dollars. You can use, most other real-world currencies, and they are buying and selling them on markets online just like a real-world stock exchange. But there's not a lot of things that you can buy with them so far except, apparently illegal drugs.
The development whipped New York Senator Chuck Schumer into action. He called a press conference to discuss Silk Road.
It's a certifiable, one-stop shop for illegal drugs that represents the most brazen attempt to peddle drugs online that we have ever seen. It's more brazen than anything else by light years.
The dark web marketplace was not so dark anymore.
LSD, cocaine, and ecstasy are now just a click of a mouse away. A new website sells illegal drugs to anyone who is willing to pay. But as I-Team investigator Michael George uncovered, the people who run the site stand by what they're doing. And for now, business is booming.
With all of the hoopla, the public was not only introduced to the site, we also met the Silk Road administrator for the very first time.
Dan Van Bommel is a recovering addict and an addiction therapist at Turning Point of Tampa. He says Silk Road is a dangerous new concept.
A drug addict will look for any way to get their addiction fed. And so when you provide an avenue that makes it easier for them, they're going to abuse it.
An administrator who runs the website disagrees. He answered my questions by email, though he wouldn't give us his name. He writes that Silk Road is satisfying people and enriching their lives. I asked the administrator of the site about the addicts who could die because of products sold through Silk Road. He said, quote, "I'm so sorry if someone you know has been hurt by drugs, but it's my sincere hope that by making drugs available in a safe, secure, and predictable way, that we will eliminate the violence and danger of obtaining and using drugs through traditional methods." Even the administrator of the website admitted to me he's not sure how long Silk Road will last, but in his own words, he says it's worth the risk.
I think Chuck Schumer did the best advertising for the site that anybody could.
Again, Curtis Green, author of Silk Road Takedown.
Instead of keeping it quiet, he goes to the world and says, look at this, look what you can buy, look what you can do, look at all this. And then that drove tens of thousands of people to the site. That's kind of amazing how he brought so much attention to something that he didn't want people looking at.
And Curtis is right. Before Schumer's press conference, Google registered very little public interest in the search term Silk Road. However, after the senator's media blitz, web searches for the site spiked. But perhaps even more notable was the curiosity of this new internet cache. Google searches for the term Bitcoin dwarfed that of Silk Road. The first major test case for this new internet cache was undeniable. Bitcoin was a smashing success in the free market of the dark web. So it should come as no surprise that Bitcoin became a major target of our government, and Curtis would eventually find himself in the crosshairs. There's nothing more that makes me happier than putting on a fire, propping up my feet, popping on a movie, and curling up next to the love of my life. That being licorice from the Licorice Guy. If you've been listening to RPA for some time, then you know that licorice is my jam, and that it does not get any better than the gourmet licorice made by the Licorice Guy. They have a great selection of flavors to choose from, like red, blue raspberry, black, and green apple, just to name a few. The freshness of the licorice will blow your mind. Seriously, if you haven't tried licorice from the Licorice Guy yet, then you ain't living life right. Trust me, you will not regret it. It's time to dump that store-bought licorice that's so hard it'll break your teeth, and get yourself the soft, fresh stuff from the Licorice Guy. What I also love about the Licorice Guy is that it's an American family-owned business. It's made right here in the beautiful US of A. Right now, Red Pilled America listeners get 15% off when they enter RPA15 at checkout. Visit licoriceguy.com and enter RPA15 at checkout. That's licoriceguy.com. They ship daily. Treat yourself and those you love and taste the difference.
Welcome back. I'm Adriana Cortez. So after a story about Silk Road hit the news, New York Senator Chuck Schumer held a press conference about the dark web marketplace. People have been acquiring illegal drugs online for years, but Silk Road was something new. It used the new internet cash, Bitcoin, as the only way to purchase products on the site. And this new technological innovation freaked the government out.
Because I think what really bothered them was that at the beginning, people thought Bitcoin was totally anonymous. It is, you couldn't get more non-anonymous at all. Cash is 10 times more anonymous than Bitcoin is, because everything on the Bitcoin ledger stays there forever.
What Curtis means here is that every Bitcoin transaction that has ever been made lives on a publicly viewable ledger called the blockchain. This is a crucial point that eventually saved Curtis from spending the rest of his life behind bars. To grasp its significance, we first need to understand what this so-called blockchain thing is. You can literally spend months on just this topic alone, so I'm going to keep it really simple here so you not only get a feel for this groundbreaking technology, but also understand how blockchain is kind of like the DNA of currency. So, what is blockchain? As you know by now, Bitcoin is internet cash, and blockchain is a technology that allows Bitcoin to be transferred from one person to another. Before Bitcoin arrived, if I wanted to transfer money to you from a distance, I needed to use a trusted third party, what we know of as a bank or a credit card company or PayPal. To illustrate this, let's take, for example, the many people that bought our awesome Red Pilled America baseball cap. To buy it, many of you went to redpilledamerica.com, clicked the shop button, selected the hat, went into your pocket or purse, pulled out your wallet, grabbed your debit card, and entered the number into our website. You eventually clicked a button that told your bank to transfer a specific amount of money from your bank account to our bank account. Both of our banks were the trusted third parties that recorded this transaction by logging it into our account ledger, or what we refer to as our bank statement. The process of buying this same hat works differently in the world of Bitcoin. Instead of a bank account, people that own some of this internet cash typically store it in a digital account called a Bitcoin wallet. That wallet can live on your computer, your smartphone, or a separate hard drive that's not connected to the internet. Just like your bank account has a number, your Bitcoin wallet has a unique series of letters and numbers called a wallet address. When you send me Bitcoin to purchase our Red Pilled America hat, for example, there is no bank middleman that records the transaction. The transaction is instead performed by a decentralized system of computers and is recorded to the public ledger called the blockchain. This removes the middleman bank and the large fees they deduct with every purchase. The blockchain is basically one big banking statement for all Bitcoin transactions. Since I don't have the luxury of drawing this out on a whiteboard, I'm going to explain how blockchain technology works through a visual analogy, without boring you with the technical details. This is how blockchain works. Let's say I give you 100 Bitcoins. Now, imagine that transaction is written down on a piece of paper. The paper is placed into a clear box. That box is sealed so that it can never be opened. And then the clear box is placed on a table that everyone can see. Anyone can look into the clear box and see the amount of money that was exchanged, who sent it, and who received it. Following me? Then let's say that from the Bitcoins I gave you, you turn around and give 10 of those Bitcoins to a friend. That transaction is also recorded onto a piece of paper. That paper is placed into a different clear box. That box is sealed so that it can never be opened. Then the second box is stacked like a Lego brick on top of the first box. Again, anyone can look into the first and second box and follow each transaction, but no one can open the boxes and make edits to the exchange. The transactions are immortalized in this blockchain. Next, your friend takes 5 of the Bitcoins that you gave him and turns around and gives them to me. Again, that transaction is recorded onto a piece of paper. The paper is placed into a new clear box. That box is sealed so that it can never be opened, and the transaction inside can never be altered. And then this third box is stacked like a Lego brick on top of the second box, which is on top of the first box. Every future transaction of these Bitcoins are recorded in a similar way and stacked on top of the last transaction. Anyone can look into every single clear box and follow each transaction, but no one can make a change to any of the past exchanges. That is the blockchain. It's a complete history of all transactions ever made with Bitcoin, and this history can never be changed or hacked. If you gave 5 Bitcoins to someone 3 years ago, you can go back to the blockchain and see that transaction forever. This is in effect what the blockchain computer program does. It records and creates a history of every single Bitcoin transaction that has ever been made, and that history can be tracked and never be changed. It's permanent. You may remember from part 1 that the very first Bitcoin transaction was when the founder of Bitcoin, Satoshi Nakamoto, sent 10 Bitcoins to the cypherpunk Hal Finney. That exact transaction can still be seen in the blockchain. In fact, it's the very first Lego block in the long chain of Bitcoin transactions that have occurred ever since. By storing transactions in this fashion, the blockchain keeps track of how many Bitcoins everyone has, just like a bank statement keeps track of how much money you have in the bank. Now you may say, yuck, I don't want everyone knowing that 7 years ago I purchased nose hair clippers from Overstock.com for 3 Bitcoins. Well, you don't have to worry about that. First, the blockchain doesn't record what you purchased unless you write it in as a note, kind of like writing in the memo section of a banking check. Second, the blockchain does not record the buyer's name or the seller's name in the transaction. It instead records the Bitcoin wallet address of the buyer and the Bitcoin wallet address of the seller. It's like recording the banking account numbers with no attached name to either account. So the only practical way that someone would know that you bought nose hair clippers 7 years ago with 3 Bitcoins is if the person knew your Bitcoin wallet address to tie you to the purchase. Otherwise, the transaction is anonymous. This is what Curtis meant when he said,
at the beginning, people thought Bitcoin was totally anonymous. You couldn't get more non-anonymous at all. Cash is 10 times more anonymous than Bitcoin is, because everything on the Bitcoin ledger stays there forever.
If you, let's say, transferred 50 coins from your Bitcoin wallet address to a cocaine vendor on Silk Road, that transaction, along with your Bitcoin wallet address, was forever recorded on the blockchain. All an FBI agent would need to do is find out who owned that Bitcoin wallet address, and they could tie you to the purchase of an illegal drug. But finding out who owns the wallet is the challenge.
So all you need is, if you found a Bitcoin address that I used, you could see that whole history forever. And all you need to do is attach a name to that address, and they'll see everything. So at the beginning, they thought Bitcoin was totally anonymous, and that scared the government. They're like, oh my gosh, they're going to be able to do this. We won't be able to do anything.
After Schumer's big media blitz, as 2011 progressed, Curtis continued acting as a moderator for Silk Road's Harm Reduction Forum.
And I wanted to help people that had questions, because I have a medical background, and to help them if they wanted to commit suicide, or they were wanting to think about doing drugs. I would steer them away from it.
But while Curtis was volunteering as a forum moderator, several federal task forces were being assembled to find the captain of Silk Road. The site was an entirely new thing. It was an anonymous marketplace on the encrypted dark web using Bitcoin to buy and sell illegal drugs. The government didn't know who was running the site or even know how to find out who was manning the wheel because Bitcoin and the dark web were hiding the identity of the sellers, purchasers, and the site administrators. The emergence of this new cryptocurrency woke up every law enforcement agency in the government. 2 separate federal task forces were formed to find the mastermind behind Silk Road, one in Baltimore and another in New York. They included agents from the DOJ, FBI, Homeland Security, DEA, Secret Service, Treasury Department, and the Postal Inspector. That's how much the government feared the power of this new internet cash. One of their primary objectives was to shut down not only Silk Road, but also Bitcoin.
The first time I ever heard the word Bitcoin was back in 2012 when I was a federal prosecutor at the U.S. Department of Justice.
That's former Department of Justice prosecutor Katie Hahn giving a speech published in December 2018. She led an investigation involving Silk Road.
And I heard the word Bitcoin because I was asked to prepare an investigation and a case against it and to help shut it down.
By the time 2012 rolled along, Silk Road had become more than just an anonymous marketplace. It had become a social gathering spot of libertarian-minded people, with the Silk Road administrator as their spiritual leader. The purveyor of Silk Road no doubt recognized his growing prominence, and on February 5, 2012, the Silk Road administrator announced his new name as Dread Pirate Roberts, or DPR for short.
I know who you are. Your cruelty reveals everything. You're the Dread Pirate Roberts, admit it.
With pride. What can I do for you?
Dread Pirate Roberts was a fictitious character from the novel and movie The Princess Bride. In the story, the original Dread Pirate Roberts was a feared pirate that developed a near-mythical reputation because of his ruthlessness and fighting prowess.
And I, as you know, am Roberts.
But how's that possible, since he's been marauding 20 years and you only left me 5 years ago?
Well, Roberts had grown so rich he wanted to retire.
Once he pillaged enough money, he retired to enjoy his riches, passing on his name and persona to another chosen person, and the cycle would repeat through each successor.
So he took me to his cabin, told me his secret. I am not the Dread Pirate Roberts, he said. I inherited the ship from the previous Dread Pirate Roberts, just as you will inherit it from me. The man I inherited from was not the real Dread Pirate Roberts either. His name was Cummerbund. The real Roberts has been retired 15 years and living like a king in Patagonia. Then he explained that the name was the important thing for inspiring the necessary fear. So we sailed ashore, took on an entirely new crew, and he stayed aboard for a while as first mate, all the time calling me Roberts. And once the crew believed, he left the ship, and I have been Roberts ever since.
Dread Pirate Roberts, or DPR, became the primary voice of Silk Road, posting grand statements on the site's community forum. He claimed Silk Road was built on libertarian principles and saw it as a grand experiment in free market principles. DPR felt that the war on drugs was a massive failure and that people should be able to put in their bodies what they see fit as long as they weren't hurting anyone else. DPR even had a book club where he promoted the study of Austrian economics, a form of libertarian free markets. As the site progressed, Curtis was in regular contact with DPR as a moderator of the community boards. He knew that there was a lot of illegal sales happening on Silk Road, but he rationalized his involvement with the fact that he was only an unpaid volunteer for the Harm Reduction Forum. But that would change in November 2012 when DPR contacted Curtis and offered him a job.
DPR reached out to me and he said, hey, he said, your work has not gone unnoticed. I think that's the exact term he used. And so I would like you to come on board as an admin to help with customer service issues.
The job description was to change passwords for users and mediate disputes between buyers and sellers. DPR said the job would take 80 hours a week and he'd pay Curtis $3,200 a month. Curtis wasn't sure if he should take the job. It was one thing to be a volunteer moderator of a forum, but it was quite another to be a paid employee of a site that was involved with the sale of illegal drugs. But after the 2008 financial crisis, jobs were hard to come by, and Curtis needed the money. After consulting with his wife and brother and convincing himself that he wasn't involved in the sale of drugs, he decided to take the job. As a paid employee, DPR required that Curtis send him a copy of his driver's license. He hesitated doing this, but eventually chalked it up to a normal procedure that any employer would require. so he sent DPR a picture of his license. Now the purveyor of the world's biggest online illegal drug marketplace knew his name and where he lived. As a customer service representative for the site, DPR gave Curtis administrator access to Silk Road.
And this is the first time I actually could see the back end.
Curtis's relationship with DPR grew, but what he didn't know was that in just over 2 months, his boss was going to target him for assassination. Do you want to hear Red Pilled America stories ad-free? Then become a Backstage subscriber. Just log on to redpilledamerica.com and click Join in the top menu. Join today and help us save America one story at a time.
Welcome back. So in November 2012, DPR hired Curtis to work as a customer service representative for Silk Road. As an employee, DPR required Curtis to send him a copy of his driver's license. Now the purveyor of the biggest online drug marketplace had his name and address, and that was not a good place to be at for what came next. On January 17, 2013, Curtis received a strange package at his front doorstep. The return address carried the name Knob. Curtis heard rumors about Knob from a Silk Road vendor. Knob was getting close with DPR and was looking to sell high quantities of illegal drugs to a Silk Road vendor. Why was Knob sending him a package, he thought. He hesitated opening it, initially just leaving it on a trash can, but ultimately his curiosity got the best of him and he grabbed a knife to open up the package. It was tightly wrapped, so he wrestled with it to pry it open, and when he did, the box burst open and a white powder caked his face. Within seconds, he felt his face go numb, but before he could react, Police Department, his door was hit with a battering ram, and a full fleet of agents stormed his house. Curtis was being raided by a federal task force hunting for the captain of Silk Road.
When he first came barging down my door, if you haven't had it happen to you, man, I would wish that upon my worst enemy. It's something that you go into shock, and I was just willing to do whatever or say anything. I'm trying to get myself out of this mess.
Curtis says he hadn't ordered cocaine. He'd been set up, sort of. For a few weeks, a DEA agent by the name of Carl Force had infiltrated the Silk Road community under the username Knob. Force was part of the federal task force based in Baltimore that was investigating Silk Road. To DPR, Knob portrayed himself as a big-time drug trafficker connected to the mafia that was not looking for tiny sales like most of the site's vendors. It wasn't worth his time. He was looking to move kilos of cocaine. Knob got close to DPR and convinced the Silk Road administrator to help him find a buyer for his product, and DPR bit. The Silk Road purveyor connected Knob with a site vendor, but that vendor must not have completely trusted the transaction, because instead of having Knob mail the cocaine directly to their address, the Silk Road vendor had Knob send the cocaine to someone else, and that someone else was Curtis. Now the Utah grandfather was caught in the trap. When the task force raided Curtis's house, his computer was running and he was logged into Silk Road. The federal agents likely assessed pretty quickly that he wasn't the person that asked for the shipment of cocaine. But the federal task force had hit a gold mine nonetheless, because they could see that Curtis had administration privileges on the site, and this was a big deal, especially for someone that had bad intentions. You see, Silk Road operated a lot like eBay. They used an escrow model to protect their buyers. When someone purchased something from Silk Road, the bitcoins weren't sent immediately to the seller. Instead, they were sent to Silk Road, where they sat in their Bitcoin wallet in escrow. Once the buyer received the shipment, he sent a message to Silk Road that the package had arrived, and at that point the money was sent from Silk Road's Bitcoin wallet to the seller's Bitcoin wallet. So at any given time, there was a lot of internet cash sitting in the site's wallet waiting for shipments to be verified. And as you may remember, in Curtis's new customer service role, he was responsible for mediating disputes between buyers and sellers. So he had control of the bitcoins that sat in the Silk Road wallet. After the agents interrogated Curtis, they arrested him and booked him in a local jail. During that time, DPR tried to contact Curtis, wondering why he hadn't been communicating with the customers. But DPR's messages went unanswered. so Dread Pirate Roberts cut off Curtis's access to Silk Road. When he was released from jail, DEA agent Carl Force demanded Curtis contact DPR and regain access to the site. So Curtis did what he was told.
I gave DPR this big, long-winded, I'm sorry, I was gone, I screwed up, so yada, yada, yada. And so he gave me a new login. He admonished me or whatnot.
Curtis gave the new login to Carl Force, and then a few days later, he handed over the username and password to a room full of roughly 20 Baltimore federal agents. That's when Curtis's troubles got exponentially worse. As he was meeting with the federal agents, someone began draining bitcoins out of Silk Road's vendor accounts.
What he did was he changed my username and password so I couldn't log in, and he sent all the Bitcoin, he drained all these Bitcoin accounts, sent it to my account on the site, so it looked like I was the guy who was doing it, because I'm the one who could have done it had I been a dishonest person. And then from my site, it went out to other exchanges or other wallets.
They were stealing the internet cache and trying to pin it on Curtis. It wasn't long before a site administrator alerted DPR to the theft. They quickly performed an internal investigation and came to the conclusion that Curtis was the thief. Having his full name and driver's license, they dug a little deeper and found out that he'd been arrested a few days earlier. DPR needed to do something about this immediately because the heist was massive, approximately 20,000 bitcoins. So to figure out how to handle this crisis, DPR turned to a trusted Silk Road administrator that he looked to as a mentor. After some back and forth, DPR came to the conclusion that Curtis needed to be terminated. So he decided to put a hit on Curtis. And who did he turn to take him out? He contacted a mafia guy he knew, Knob, the same undercover DEA agent, Carl Force, that sent Curtis the cocaine. DPR agreed to pay Knob $80,000 for Curtis's assassination, with half up front and the other half when the job was complete. DPR wired Knob $40,000 from an anonymous wire transfer service called Technocash Limited. Once he received the money, Carl Force and other agents staged Curtis's death by physically torturing him to get a picture of Curtis authentically distressed. Then they faked a picture of him dead. Carl Force then sent the image to DPR, and according to the Department of Justice, the Silk Road administrator wired the remaining $40,000 to Knob using the same anonymous wire transfer service. Curtis was temporarily in the clear with Silk Road because DPR thought he successfully had him murdered. But Curtis now had perhaps an even bigger problem to deal with. He was being framed for the theft of roughly 20,000 bitcoins.
The government was positive that I was guilty of stealing all this money. And they were doing everything in their power to try to pin it on me.
Just a few weeks after Curtis's fake murder in March 2013, DPR had another crisis. A site user going by the moniker Friendly Chemist claimed to have been fronted $700,000 worth of drugs from a Hell's Angel and was in partnership with another Silk Road vendor to sell the drugs on the site. But now that vendor had skipped town, leaving Friendly Chemist on the hook to pay back the Hell's Angels. So Friendly Chemist told DPR that if he didn't pay him for his loss, he'd release identifying information for dozens of Silk Road vendors and thousands of buyers. DPR asked Friendly Chemist to put him in contact with the Hells Angels to see if he could work out something with them. And within a few days, a user named Red and White contacted DPR, claiming to be the Hells Angels member that fronted Friendly Chemist the illegal drugs. After a back and forth, DPR proposed hiring the Hells Angel to kill Friendly Chemist, fearing he would follow through on his threats to release the names of Silk Road vendors and their customers. When the Hells Angel gave DPR a cost of between $150,000 and $300,000 to kill Friendly Chemist, DPR responded, quote, "Don't want to be a pain here, but the price seems high. Not long ago, I had a clean hit done for $80,000. Are the prices you quoted the best you can do?" End quote. The two agreed to $150,000 to murder Friendly Chemist, which at the time was roughly 1,670 bitcoins. So DPR paid Red and White in bitcoins and waited for confirmation of the murder. A day later, Red and White confirmed that he killed Friendly Chemist and followed up with a picture of the deceased. But now there was another problem. Apparently, while the killers were torturing Friendly Chemist, he divulged that he was working with another user by the name of Tony76, and the pair were together ripping off other Silk Road vendors. DPR knew Tony76. That user ripped off Silk Road customers a year earlier to the tune of hundreds of thousands of dollars. What luck it was for that scammer to fall into DPR's lap. So Dread Pirate Roberts calls for a hit on Tony76 as well. But the Hells Angels Red and White comes back with another complication. Tony76 lives with 3 other drug dealers, so taking him out alone would be hard. What to do? DPR decides to take them all out, and he sends $500,000 worth of Bitcoin to Red and White. A week later, the Hells Angels Red and White confirms the murder was completed with a message, quote, "That problem was dealt with," end quote. And just like that, DPR ordered and paid for the assassination of a total of 6 people that were threatening his Silk Road empire. Apparently, Silk Road went from a high-minded libertarian marketplace to a bloodthirsty drug cartel. Around this time, another Silk Road user named Death from Above approached DPR, claiming that he'd reveal his identity to law enforcement unless he paid hundreds of thousands of dollars. DPR didn't bite. As you can see, DPR was constantly getting confronted with these kinds of situations. With the murders and the thwarting of extortion, it appeared that all of DPR's loose ends were tied up. But behind the scenes, the federal investigation was gaining steam. By May 2013, the federal task force from Baltimore and the one from New York had already been sharing notes. In parallel, the NSA quietly made Bitcoin its #1 priority, and it began focusing on the digital currency. The agency's surveillance program was reportedly codenamed Monkey Rocket, and it targeted both Bitcoin and another cryptocurrency called Liberty Reserve. The fruits of their labor became public in late May.
U.S. prosecutors have described Liberty Reserve as the financial hub of the cybercrime world. Based in Costa Rica, it's alleged the currency transfer and payment processing company allowed its customers to move money anonymously from one account to another via the internet with virtually no questions asked. U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York, Preet Bharara.
Today we announced charges in what may be the largest international money laundering case ever brought by the United States. Specifically, we unsealed charges against Liberty Reserve and 7 of its principals and employees, who for years have operated one of the world's most widely used digital currencies.
The takedown included an outfit called Technocash. You may remember that name. That's the same anonymous wire transfer service DPR used to pay for his fake hit on Curtis Green.
Liberty Reserve allowed users to open accounts using fictitious names, including Russian hacker. One person was registered under the name Joe Bogus with the address 123 Fake Main Street. 45 bank accounts have been restrained or seized. According to the indictment, 3 Westpac accounts containing $38 million were involved in the scandal. The accounts were held under the name Technocash Limited.
Having just used Technocash to pay for Curtis Green's murder, it's highly likely that DPR was aware of the company's takedown. DPR must have been feeling the heat. As the months progressed, DPR was approached by yet another site user looking for a payout. Going by the name French Maid, this user sent DPR a message saying, quote, "I have received important information that you need to know ASAP." He signed the note Carl. A few hours later, French Maid followed up with DPR, claiming that his name was not Carl, but rather Carla Sofia. She claimed to have access to an insider of the federal investigation into Silk Road. This caught DPR's interest, and he began purchasing information from French Maid with Bitcoin. Do you remember what we said about Bitcoin being the DNA of currency? Well, anyway, we'll get to that later. Even with a supposed insider feeding DPR information, the investigation began closing in on a suspect for Dread Pirate Roberts. Their suspect was living in San Francisco, and his name was Ross Ulbricht. But the task force didn't want to just arrest the guy. They wanted to try to catch him in the act of operating the Silk Road. By tracking his IP address, they learned that Ross often logged in at the Glen Park Library in San Francisco. So a team of federal agents set up at the library, ready to pounce. And when they did, it set off a chain of events that showed that the technology driving Bitcoin could be viewed as the DNA of currency and used to hunt down criminals. coming up on Part 3 of Crypto. Who stole the Bitcoin from Silk Road?
Going back to the blockchain and looking at the stolen 21,000 Bitcoin, we saw that the patterns of the theft were very different from French Maze and Death from Above's. The stolen funds from the Silk Road accounts went straight to one place.
Was there more than one DPR that you knew of as...
I know that there were people that kind of took on the role.
Who was the Hell's Angel hitman?
Why did they target it? Because Wall Street wanted to destroy Bitcoin before it could get big enough to compete for them, because a lot of people don't want to have to deal with central bankers.
Did anyone really get murdered?
They needed a scapegoat, and Ross was their scapegoat. And I personally think it was because of the Bitcoin.
And the real question becomes, is this like armies? You know, it's illegal to have a private army in the United States. Should it be illegal to have private money?
Is Bitcoin really dangerous for America?
Red Pilled America is an iHeartRadio original podcast. It's owned and produced by Patrick Corelchi and me, Adriana Cortez of Informed Ventures. Now you can get ad-free access to our entire archive of episodes by becoming a Backstage subscriber. To subscribe, visit redpilledamerica.com and click Join in the top menu. That's redpilledamerica.com and click Join in the top menu. Thanks for listening.